The alarm clock rings at 6 in the morning. You wake up tired. You drink your coffee. You commute to a job where you trade your time for a paycheck. You pay your bills. You save a little bit if you are lucky. You go to sleep. You repeat this for 40 years hoping that one day you will have enough to stop. This is the script that 99% of the population follows. It is the script written by the education system and upheld by societal expectations. It is a script that is designed to keep the engine of the economy running, but it is not designed to make you free. While you run on this treadmill, there is another group of people playing an entirely different game. They do not trade time for money. They do not fear inflation. They do not look at debt as a burden. They do not pay the same taxes you do. And they certainly do not save their way to wealth. These are the billionaires and the ultra-wealthy. They are not just lucky, and they are not all geniuses. They simply understand the mechanics of the economic machine better than everyone else. They know that the rules of money changed in 1971. They know that the system is tilted in favor of capital and against labor. Most people look at the ultra-rich with a mix of admiration and resentment. They think the secret is working harder or skipping the morning latte. But the gap between the rich and the poor is not about coffee. It is about structural knowledge. It is about 5 specific economic mechanisms that act as invisible levers. If you pull them, they propel you upward. If you ignore them, they keep you anchored to the ground no matter how hard you run. Today we're going to tear down the curtain. We're going to look at the economic reality through the eyes of the top 0.1%. We are not giving you financial advice. We are giving you a map of the territory so you can stop walking blind. This is the story of how the game is actually played. The first secret is the most fundamental and yet the most misunderstood. It is the difference between linear income and exponential assets. Most of us are taught from a young age that the path to success is to get a good job and work hard. The problem with this advice is that it ties your income to your time. Time is the most limited resource you have. You only have 24 hours in a day. Even if you are a high-powered lawyer or a specialized surgeon, there is a hard ceiling on how much you can earn, because there is a hard ceiling on how much you can work. If you stop working, the money stops flowing. This is linear income. It is a trap. The wealthy understand that you cannot get rich by renting out your time. You get rich by owning things. This is the distinction between labor and capital. In the world of economics, there is a famous concept popularized by the economist Thomas Piketty. He expressed it as R is greater than G. This means that the return on capital is historically higher than the growth of the economy and wages. Let us break that down. If you work for a living, your wages might grow by 2 or 3% a year if you are lucky. That is G. But if you own assets like stocks or real estate or businesses, those assets tend to grow at 5 or 7 or 10% a year. That is R. Over a lifetime, the gap between R and G becomes a canyon. The person relying on wages falls further and further behind the person holding assets. Billionaires focus almost exclusively on acquiring assets that detach their income from their time. They build or buy systems. A business is a system. A rental property is a system. A portfolio of dividend-paying stocks is a system. These things work while the owner sleeps. Consider the story of a factory worker in the 1950s compared to a factory owner. The worker trades 8 hours for a fixed wage. If the factory becomes twice as efficient due to new technology, the worker does not get double the pay. He might get a small raise, or he might get fired because fewer workers are needed. The owner, however, captures all the value of that efficiency. The asset has become more productive. The secret here is ownership. The poor and the middle class consume. The rich acquire. When a middle-class person gets a bonus, they might buy a new car or a fancy vacation. These are liabilities. They take money out of your pocket. When a wealthy person gets a surplus, they buy an asset that puts money back into their pocket. They are addicted to the accumulation of equity. They know that true freedom is not a large salary. True freedom is having assets that pay for your lifestyle so that your time belongs to you. The second secret is one that might make you angry, but it is essential to understand. It is the knowledge that inflation is not an accident. It is a feature of the system, and it is a tax on those who hold cash. In 1971, President Richard Nixon severed the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. Before this moment, money was tethered to something physical. Governments could not just print as much as they wanted because they needed the gold to back it up. After 1971, we entered the era of fiat currency. Money became a concept backed only by government decree. Since then, the supply of money has expanded largely without restraint. When the government prints more money, the value of each individual dollar goes down. We see this as rising prices at the grocery store or the gas station. We call it inflation. The average person views inflation as a nuisance or a storm to be weathered. They try to save their cash in a bank account to feel safe. The wealthy know that cash is a melting ice cube. If inflation is running at 5% and your bank account pays you 0.1%, you are losing purchasing power every single day. You are effectively being taxed for holding currency. But here is the twist. Inflation does not hurt everyone equally. In fact, inflation makes the rich richer. This is due to a phenomenon known as the Cantillon effect. This economic theory states that when new money enters the economy, it does not get distributed evenly. It enters at specific points, usually through central banks and large financial institutions. The people who get this new money first are the banks and the large corporations and the investors. They get to use this money before prices have risen. They use it to buy assets like houses and stocks. This buying pressure drives up the price of assets. By the time the new money trickles down to the average worker in the form of wages, prices for everything have already gone up. The wealthy position themselves to benefit from this. They do not hold cash. They hold scarce assets. Real estate, gold, art, equities. When the money supply expands, the paper value of these assets rises. The poor and middle class who hold cash or rely on fixed wages see their purchasing power evaporate. The rich see their net worth inflate. Understanding this changes your behavior. You stop trying to save your way to wealth in a savings account. You realize that in a fiat system you must be an investor just to preserve your wealth, let alone grow it. You must own things that the government cannot print. This leads us directly to the third secret, which is perhaps the most powerful tool in the billionaire arsenal. Leverage. Specifically the use of debt. We are taught that debt is bad. We are told to cut up our credit cards and pay off our mortgages as fast as possible. For the average person, this is good advice. Consumer debt is a cancer. Borrowing money at 20% interest to buy clothes or gadgets that lose value is financial suicide. But the wealthy categorize debt differently. They distinguish between bad debt and good debt. Bad debt is debt used to buy liabilities. Good debt is debt used to buy assets. Imagine you want to buy a rental property that costs $100,000. You could save up $100,000, which might take you 10 years. Or you could put down $20,000 and borrow the remaining $80,000 from the bank. If you buy it with cash, you own one property. If the property value goes up 10%, you make $10,000. That is a 10% return on your money. But if you use leverage, you can take that same $100,000 and put $20,000 down on 5 different properties. You now control $500,000 worth of real estate. If the value goes up 10%, you make $50,000. Your return on your initial cash is 50%, not 10%. Furthermore, the tenants in those properties pay the rent. That rent covers the mortgage payments. So you are using the bank's money to buy the asset, and you are using the tenant's money to pay back the bank. You are sitting in the middle managing the flow. This is how real wealth is built. It is built using other people's money. Corporations do this all the time. Apple borrows billions of dollars even though they have billions in cash. Why? Because the interest rate on the debt is lower than the return they can get by investing that money into their business or buying back their own stock. The wealthy use debt as a shield against taxes and a sword for growth. They do not fear debt. They respect it. They understand the terms. They know that as long as the return on the asset is higher than the cost of the debt, they are winning. However, this requires financial intelligence. Leverage cuts both ways. If the asset value drops, you still owe the debt. That is why the poor get crushed by debt. They use it for things that do not generate income. The rich use it to multiply their capital base. Now we must discuss the fourth secret, the one that generates the most headlines and the most confusion. Taxes. You often hear stories about billionaires paying a lower tax rate than their secretaries. People assume this is because of illegal evasion or offshore accounts. While that happens, the reality is much simpler and completely legal. The tax code is written to incentivize certain behaviors. Governments want housing. They want jobs. They want energy production. To encourage this, they offer tax breaks to people who provide these things. If you build an apartment complex, you provide housing. The government gives you depreciation benefits that can wipe out your tax bill. If you start a business and employ people, you get deductions. The employee, on the other hand, has the fewest tax advantages. Taxes are taken out of their paycheck before they even see it. They earn money, they are taxed, and they spend what is left. The business owner earns money, they spend on expenses to grow the business, and then they are taxed on what is left. It is a completely different order of operations. But the ultimate strategy of the ultra-wealthy is something called buy, borrow, die. Here is how it works. Let us say you are a billionaire with $100 million in Amazon stock. If you sell that stock to buy a yacht or a mansion, you have to pay capital gains tax. That could be 20% or more. That is $20 million gone. So you do not sell. Instead, you go to a bank. You tell the bank you have $100 million in high-quality stock. You ask for a loan of $10 million using the stock as collateral. The bank is happy to do this because the loan is secured. They might charge you a very low interest rate, maybe 3 or 4%. Loans are not income. You do not pay tax on borrowed money. So you get $10 million tax-free. You use that money to live your lifestyle. You pay the small interest payments, which might even be tax deductible. If the stock goes up in value over time, you can borrow more. You can keep doing this until you die. When you die, your estate passes to your heirs. In many jurisdictions, the cost basis of the assets is stepped up to the current market value. This effectively wipes out the capital gains tax liability that built up over your lifetime. This is how dynastic wealth is preserved. The rich live on debt, while their assets grow unmolested by taxes. The poor live on wages, which are taxed at the highest rates. It is a different set of rules for a different class of player. The fifth secret is less about mechanics and more about psychology and information. It is the understanding of asymmetric risk and the power of networks. The average person thinks risk is something to be avoided. They look for a safe job and a safe savings account. They are terrified of losing what little they have. This is a scarcity mindset. The wealthy understand that risk is the price of entry for reward, but they do not gamble. They look for asymmetric bets. An asymmetric bet is a situation where the potential upside is much greater than the potential downside. Think of an angel investor putting money into startups. They might invest in 10 companies. They know that 5 of them will likely go to zero. 3 might break even. But 1 might become the next Uber or Google and return 1,000 times the investment. The loss is capped at the amount invested. The gain is uncapped. This is asymmetry. The poor typically engage in the opposite. They take risks where the upside is capped and the downside is unlimited. Driving a car without insurance is a risk where you save a little money but could lose everything. Working a job where you can be fired at any moment but your salary can only go up by 3% is a form of negative asymmetry. Billionaires also understand that information is the most valuable commodity. They build networks that give them access to information before the public gets it. They know about the zoning change before the land is sold. They know about the merger before it is announced. They operate in circles where opportunities are shared. This is often called the old boys club, but really it is just the network effect of capital. Money attracts money. Deals attract deals. If you are known as a person who can fund a project, the best projects come to you. The poor and middle class are often isolated. They get their financial information from the news, which is usually reporting on things that have already happened. By the time you hear about a hot stock on the news, the smart money has already bought it and is waiting to sell it to you. The wealthy do not react to the news. They create the news. Now that we have laid out these 5 secrets, the picture should be getting clearer. The economic system is a machine. It has inputs and outputs. It has gears and levers. For the majority of people, the machine is a mystery. They are fed into it as fuel. They work, they spend, they borrow, and they repeat. They are the liquidity that allows the system to function. But for the minority who understand the blueprint, the machine is a vehicle. They sit in the driver's seat. They use assets to capture value. They use debt to amplify force. They use the tax code to preserve efficiency. They use inflation to erode their liabilities. This might feel unfair. In many ways it is. The system rewards capital accumulation over labor. It rewards risk taking over safety. It rewards those who already have resources. But getting angry at the machine will not change how it works. The only way to change your position is to change your strategy. You do not need to be a billionaire to use these principles. You can start small. You can stop looking at your salary as the end goal and start looking at it as seed capital. You can stop buying liabilities and start buying assets, even if it is just 1 share of a stock or a small piece of real estate. You can educate yourself on the tax laws in your country. You can learn to use debt responsibly. You can shift your mindset from that of a consumer to that of an owner. Let us look deeper into the historical context of why this separation exists. We need to understand that for most of human history, wealth was land. If you own the land, you own the production of food, and you own the people who lived on it. This was feudalism. The Industrial Revolution shifted wealth from land to industry. The factory owners became the new kings. But the dynamic remained the same. There were those who owned the means of production, and those who operated them. Today we are in the information age. The means of production are now code and intellectual property and networks. But the divide is still there. It is perhaps even sharper. In the past, a factory owner needed thousands of workers to build wealth. Today, a small team of software engineers can build a product like WhatsApp and sell it for $19 billion. The leverage of technology has made the accumulation of wealth faster and more extreme. This brings us back to the concept of time. The wealthy decouple their wealth from time. But they also look at time differently. They think in generations. The poor usually think in terms of days or weeks. How do I pay the rent on Friday? The middle class thinks in terms of years. How do I save for a vacation next summer? The wealthy think in decades and centuries. They ask questions like, how will this asset perform over the next 50 years? How will this trust fund serve my great-grandchildren? This long-term horizon allows them to weather storms that wipe out short-term thinkers. When the stock market crashes, the poor panic and sell because they need the money now. The wealthy buy because they know the market will recover in 5 years, and they can afford to wait. They act as the buyers of last resort, scooping up valuable assets at fire sale prices. This happened in 2008. It happened in 2020. Every crisis is a transfer of wealth from the impatient to the patient, from the fearful to the prepared. There is also a cultural aspect to this. In many families, money is a taboo subject. We are taught that it is rude to talk about money. We do not ask people how much they earn or how much they invested. This silence keeps us ignorant. In wealthy families, money is the dinner table conversation. Children are taught about compound interest and trust funds before they can drive. They are mentored in the language of finance. They are given the cheat codes early. If you did not grow up in such a family, you have to seek out this education yourself. You have to break the taboo. You have to find mentors and read books and watch videos like this one. You have to reprogram your mind to see money, not as something you need to survive, but as a tool you use to build. Let us revisit the idea of the tax on cash. It is important to really internalize how damaging inflation is to the working class. Imagine you work for $20 an hour. You save $1,000. You put it under your mattress. 10 years later, you take it out. That $1,000 might only buy you what $600 bought you when you earned it. Who stole the $400? The system did. The government printed money to pay for its debts and its wars and its programs, and the bill was paid by the devaluation of your savings. The billionaire who took that $1,000 10 years ago and bought gold or land now has an asset worth $2,000. They did not work any harder than you. They just stored their energy in a better battery. Money is essentially stored energy. It is the battery of your life force. If you store your life force in a battery that leaks, you are wasting your life. If you store it in a battery that recharges itself, you are preserving your life. This is why financial literacy is not just about money. It is about dignity. It is about respecting the time and effort you put into the world. So what is the practical takeaway here? We are not suggesting you go out and take a massive loan to buy a risky asset. That is a recipe for disaster if you do not know what you are doing. The journey starts with the realization that the game is being played on 2 levels. Level 1 is the labor market. Level 2 is the asset market. Most people spend their whole lives trying to win at level 1. They get more degrees. They work overtime. They politic for a promotion. But the prizes at level 1 are capped. The wealthy play at level 2. They might start at level 1 to get some initial capital, but their goal is always to migrate to level 2. You must begin to build your bridge to level 2. This requires sacrifice. It requires living below your means so you have a surplus to invest. It requires studying the asset classes available to you. It requires understanding the tax code. It requires you to stop acting like a victim of the economy and start acting like a participant. When you look at a skyscraper, do not just look at the architecture. Think about who owns it. Think about how it was financed. Think about the tax breaks the developers got. Think about the cash flow coming from the tenants. When you see a price increase at the supermarket, do not just complain about corporate greed. Think about the money supply. Think about where that extra liquidity is flowing. When you see a headline about a billionaire paying no taxes, do not just get angry. Ask yourself how they did it. What mechanism did they use? Is there a version of that mechanism available to you? The secrets of the billionaires are not magic. They are mechanics. They are the physics of finance. And like physics, they apply to everyone. Gravity pulls on the poor man, just as it pulls on the rich man. The difference is that the rich man has built a plane while the poor man is jumping off a cliff. We live in an era of unprecedented access to information. The barriers to entry for investing have never been lower. You can buy fractional shares of stock. You can buy real estate through crowdfunding. You can learn about economics for free on the internet. The gatekeepers are gone, but the psychological barriers remain. The biggest barrier is the belief that wealth is something that happens to other people. The belief that the system is so rigged there is no point in trying. Yes, the system is rigged. It is rigged in favor of owners. So become an owner. It is rigged in favor of debtors. So learn to use debt. It is rigged in favor of the long term. So stop thinking short term. The 5 secrets we discussed are the map, the asset trade-off, the inflation hedge, the leverage multiplier, the tax efficiency, the asymmetric risk. These are the coordinates. The destination is up to you. You can go back to sleep and hope for the best. You can continue to trade your hours for dollars and hope that inflation does not eat you alive. You can continue to fear debt and pay maximum taxes. Or you can wake up. You can start to study the machine. You can start to pull the levers. You can start to write your own script. The world of economics is cold and indifferent. It does not care if you are a good person. It does not care if you work hard. It only cares if you understand the rules. The billionaires know the rules. Now you know them too. The question is, what will you do with them? Let us take a moment to consider the concept of scarcity versus abundance. The economic model we are taught in school is based on scarcity. Limited resources, limited jobs, limited money. This creates a competitive environment where my gain is your loss. This is a zero-sum game. However, the game of capital creation is often a positive-sum game. When a new technology is created, it adds value to the world that did not exist before. When a business solves a problem, it creates wealth out of thin air. The wealthy operate with an abundance mindset because they see the potential for expansion everywhere. They do not hoard their money under a mattress because they know that money must circulate to grow. This is a fundamental shift in worldview. If you believe there is a fixed amount of pie, you fight for your slice. If you believe you can bake more pies, you open a bakery. The billionaires are the bakers. They control the ovens. Let us also touch on the importance of adaptability. The economic landscape is constantly changing. Laws change. Technologies change. Geopolitics change. The strategies that worked in the 1980s might not work today. In the 80s, interest rates were 18%. You could get rich just by buying government bonds. Today, interest rates are much lower. The strategy must adapt. The wealthy are constantly adapting. They have advisors and experts helping them navigate the shifting currents. You might not have a team of advisors, but you have the ability to learn and adapt. Rigidity is the enemy of wealth. If you are stuck in the old way of doing things, you will be left behind. You must remain fluid. You must be willing to unlearn what you thought was true. For example, many people still believe that their home is their biggest asset. But if you live in it and it produces no cash flow and costs you money every month in maintenance and taxes, and interest implies it is a liability. It only becomes an asset when you sell it or rent it out. This distinction is crucial. The wealthy collect assets that pay them to own them. Dividends, rent, royalties, interest. They focus on cash flow, not just capital appreciation. Capital appreciation is gambling on the future price. Cash flow is reality in the present. If you can build a life where your monthly expenses are covered by the cash flow from your assets, you are technically retired. It does not matter if you are 30 or 60. You have exited the rat race. This is the goal. Not $1 billion, but freedom. The $1 billion is just a scorecard. The freedom is the prize. To achieve this, you must become a student of value. You must learn to recognize value where others see nothing. You must learn to assess risk accurately. You must learn to control your emotions. Fear and greed are the 2 destroyers of wealth. Fear keeps you on the sidelines. Greed makes you jump into scams. The wealthy cultivate a detached rationality. They look at the numbers. If the numbers work, they move. If they do not, they pass. They do not get emotionally attached to their investments. A stock does not know you own it. A house does not love you back. They're just tools. As we conclude this exploration, remember that the economy is nothing more than the aggregate of human action. It is billions of people making decisions every day. It is complex, but it is not magic. The patterns repeat. The cycles turn. Boom and bust. Inflation and deflation. The names change, but the mechanics stay the same. The Medicis in Renaissance Florence used the same principles of banking and leverage that Wall Street uses today. The Romans debased their currency, just as modern central banks do. The history of money is a circle. By studying the past, you can predict the future. By understanding the secrets of the few, you can improve the life of the many, starting with yourself. You have the knowledge. You have the potential. The rest is execution. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is bridged by action. Do not let this just be another video you watch and forget. Let it be the spark. Look at your finances today. Look at your assets. Look at your debt. Look at your taxes. Ask yourself, are you playing the game, or are you being played? The choice has always been yours. The alarm clock will ring again tomorrow morning. You will have to wake up. But maybe tomorrow you will wake up with a different perspective. Maybe tomorrow you will start building your own machine. Because in the end, the only thing that truly keeps you poor is the ignorance of how wealth is built. And that is a problem you can solve.